Last year, the Jaguars chose Urban Meyer as their head coach. There was just one problem with that. Everything. But let's not dwell on that. Now they have a new head coach, Doug Pederson. He's won a Super Bowl. He knows what Brett Favre smells like. And he always looks like he's down to work a grill with some lean meats. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shut Up Football. I'm Jeff Stoltzfus. That's Kevin. And this episode, we can't shut up about the Jaguars. Been rough times for Duval. They haven't had a winning season in 5 years, but with a competent head coach and 2 good drafts behind them, it feels like they're about to pick themselves up, strap on their boots, and take their place in the sun. Did I say strap on? We're talking about the 2022 Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars really shook up their depth chart this season, attacking free agency with the gusto, and another good haul in the draft. We're talking about a rookie with sneaky value, the next Deebo Samuel, and someone's fantasy value is about to spike. Is it you? Is it me? Is it you? And now it's time for a breakdown. Wait for it. Wait for it. Hello, sunshine. Trevor freaking Lawrence was last year's first overall pick in the draft. He was the best damn quarterback prospect since John Elway. A can't miss. And if you started him in your fantasy football league, may God have mercy on your soul. He scored average points for the position in only 2 games all season. In the rest, it was a barrage of karate kicks straight to the groin. Hi-ya! Lawrence's stats were abysmal, but they don't tell the whole story. While it's true he got worse as the season went on, he had a lot more adversity than your average rookie. His head coach went from man to meme after a litany of public embarrassments. DJ Chark was injured, as was Travis Etienne. Receivers were dropping passes like hotcakes, and James Robinson was benched. Not to mention, sometimes they hiked the ball over his damn head. The man is 6'6". Who are you hiking that to? But while you can explain away most of his horrific rookie season, it wouldn't matter for anything going forward if there weren't changes. To hit the reset button on Lawrence's career, the Jaguars needed to get an experienced head coach, better experienced receivers, and bolster their defense so games don't get out of hand early. And to their credit, check, and kinda check-ish. Lawrence's rookie season was like watching Netflix's Tiger King. We all watched it, but 2 years later, damned if we can remember anything about it. A lot of great quarterback careers had lackluster rookie seasons. It's no big deal. The backups are C.J. Beathard, Jake Luton, and E.J. Perry. There are no future starters here, but they're all solid backups. Beathard is on the last year of his deal, so it's possible that whoever wins that 3 spot might be the primary backup next year. I expect good things from Trevor Lawrence this year. He's a good bet in Redraft and Dynasty. I wouldn't take him as one of my main QBs in best ball, but he's a decent third. All the first-round quarterbacks taken in 2021 were a good reminder that landing spots matter, and Jacksonville is no longer the vomitous hellscape it once was. I mean, at least not for football. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like the video, and click the bell. It helps the channel grow. YouTube said, I'll get a farthing if you do. Is that money? Sounds like crypto. Travis Etienne was their second first-round pick last year. 5'10", 215 pounds. He's a great running back. But the selection was eyebrow-raising for a couple of reasons. First, they already had James Robinson at running back. And 2, Urban Meyer said Etienne would be spending minicamp at wide receiver, not running back. Did they just spend a first-round pick on a scat back? They did not. They were suggesting a hybrid role, which seemed odd considering they already had Laviska Shenault. Unfortunately, we never got to see whatever they were planning. Etienne suffered a Liz Frank injury in August, and he was placed on IR. In his time with Clemson, Etienne rushed for nearly 5,000 yards, over 1,000 receiving yards, 78 touchdowns, and averaged 7.2 yards per carry. He had a 51.7 career breakaway run percentage. That's higher than Javonte Williams and Najee Harris. As for the Liz Frank injury, lots of NFL players have come back from it. In fact, Etienne is already back, impressing coaches and OTAs with his speed. This offseason, everybody keeps saying everyone is the next Deebo Samuel. This guy's Deebo, that guy's Deebo, everybody's Deebo. So of course, they think that Travis Etienne could be Deebo Samuel here. When asked about the possibility, he said he'd love to be used in such a role. If anyone has the ability to fill that kind of role and make you forget about Deebo Samuel, it's Travis Etienne. And he won't end up bitching about it afterwards and holding out to get traded. I don't care how they use him. Get him on the field and he will produce. When Leonard Fournette fell out of favor with the Jags in 2020, undrafted free agent James Robinson pole vaulted to the top of the depth chart and rushed for 1,000 yards. It was a Cinderella story, if Cinderella was immediately replaced the very next year. Quick pitch to Disney, Cinderella gets fat and has a sexy stepsister. Robinson's rushing total last year wasn't great. However, 8 touchdowns helped him achieve respectable fantasy numbers most weeks. Despite being the lead back, Robinson rushed for 767 yards. Not that he underperformed. His yards per carry average actually improved from his rookie year. The real reason his overall yardage dipped was his rushing attempts per game dropped. Hard to put up numbers when you're not on the field. He was even benched once for fumbling, which was weird because he only fumbled twice all year, and the same couldn't be said for his head coach. Robinson had only 52% of the team's rushing attempts. That's adding up Carlos Hyde, Daria Gumbawale, and all the wide receiver attempts too, but excluding Trevor Lawrence, who technically had the second most rushing attempts. In Week 16, Robinson tore his Achilles. He's unlikely to be cleared for camp. And while he remains optimistic, it's possible he starts the season on the PUP, meaning he'd miss at least the first 6 games. Is Raquel Armstead still on his team? He was and then he wasn't. I think he's back now. It really doesn't matter. The Jaguars selected Snoop Conner out of Ole Miss in the 5th round this year. He's 5'10", 222 pounds. He ran a 4.5. He doesn't have great long speed, but that's not why you draft him. He's a one-cut pounder. He's gonna cut, and he's gonna go. With power. The Jags traded up to snag him. They wanted him. Coach Pederson has had a history of using multiple backs. Guys like Corey Clement found their way into the rotation. They were never the main back, but they got snaps, and sometimes they made trips to the end zone. Snoop Conner will never be an RB1, but his fantasy value is not 0, and for where you're likely to land him, it's worth a late-round dart throw for some depth. Even more so if Robinson can't go in Week 1. Travis Etienne in all formats. You want him? You need him? Go get him. Grab James Robinson in redraft, if he's healthy. I'm not concerned about his ability or his role. Even if he keeps 40% of this backfield, I think he'll be a viable fantasy asset. He'll have standalone value and bounce between an RB2 or RB3 each week. The Etienne hype is building, and Robinson might barely make it back for Week 1. These factors could depress his value and provide a fantastic late-round bargain. However, if Robinson starts the year on the PUP list, proceed with caution. That's never a good sign. You may feel like a fantasy sniper when you snag him late and stash him in your IR spot, until that 6 weeks turns into 7 or 8. Sometimes setbacks occur, and I'd hate to stash somebody for half the season unless I truly believed they were going to win me the rest of the season. Snoop Conner in Dynasty. He'll at least have an opportunity for a rotational role, and if Robinson starts the year on the PUP, the short-term ceiling is higher. You don't have to fall in love with every player you draft. Love the opportunity. He's basically free, and if you can flip him later, that much better. Christian Kirk was added in free agency. Last year, he led the Cardinals with 982 yards and 5 touchdowns. It was enough to get a big fat contract from the Jags, one that people refuse to shut up about, even though other receivers have gotten more money since. But I guess people think those receivers deserved it. Who is Christian Kirk? Or what is Christian Kirk? A poor man's Stephon Diggs? Selected in the 2nd round out of Texas A&M in the 2018 draft. He's 5'10", 200 pounds. He's got 4.4 speed, but he's never topped 1,000 yards or 6 touchdowns in a season. He's never been a top 25 fantasy asset at the position. So does he suck or what? I don't think so. He's not a top 10 guy, but he's good. He's got deep speed and runs good routes underneath. He's only 25 years old, and they paid him to be the #1 receiver for Sunshine. If he's Trevor Lawrence's top receiver, I think he could see 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns this year. That would have put him in the top 20 fantasy points for receivers last year. near the number 15 spot, just above Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins. That feels reasonable. It's an improvement, but also likely his ceiling. Last year, Marvin Jones Jr. had the most receiving yards for the Jags, but that's not saying much. It was only 832 yards. There were only 3 games where you were happy he was in your lineup. Jones has always been a good receiver, but he's better in a supporting role, like Jonah Hill or Spanks. His end zone target share was 47%, second in the league and better than Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, even Mark Andrews, but it only translated into 3 touchdowns. No bueno, Marvin. Even as the number 2 target in this offense, I could see him repeating his numbers from last year, but without a couple of extra touchdowns, that doesn't really do much for your fantasy team. It's just depth. Zay Jones was added in free agency. Last year, he had 546 yards and 1 touchdown with the Raiders. Not very impressive. It would be easy to dismiss Jones as a standard depth piece, if not for the fact that the Jaguars let DJ Chark walk, and Coach Pederson and GM Trent Baalke chose Jones over other receivers still on the market. Either they really like him, or they're extremely stupid. The contract was for 3 years, $24 million, $14 million of which was guaranteed. That's getting on the field money. Jones didn't get a ton of targets last year, and the ones he got were horrible. Thrown at his feet, thrown out of bounds, thrown to the other team. I think all of Derek Carr's worst passes went to Zay Jones. That is until week 16. After Carr's favorite target Darren Waller was injured, Zay Jones found a slow but steady increase in targets. Catchable targets. And he looked pretty good. In week 17, he had 8 catches for 120 yards. He's a big-bodied receiver and he explodes off the line. It's taken a very long time for him to get going, but if he can start in Jacksonville how he finished in Vegas, he's going to be more than depth. I like Zay Jones going into this year. This is Laviska Shenault's 3rd year in the league. Honestly, I thought it was more. The Laviska hype train has been chewing nonstop for a while now, and this year, he's the next Deebo Samuel. 2 seasons, 600 yards apiece, 0 touchdowns last year. I know he's talented, but when do we see it translate into fantasy production? He's a hybrid player, but they invested in another one. He's a wide receiver, but they brought in more receivers. The optics aren't great. Trevor Lawrence said Laviska Shenault looks faster this year, but speed wasn't the problem last year. Catching the ball was. Last year he led the team in drops. It's hard to build trust with your quarterback when you keep dropping the ball. He's only 23 years old, but his path to relevance on this team is only getting more and more cluttered every year. People keep asking, where does Laviska Shenault fit into this offense? Maybe the answer is the bench. I flippin' love Jamal Agnew. He's speedy, has good hands, and good contact balance. In week 3, he provided a spark. He returned a missed field goal by the Cardinals, 109 yards for a touchdown. As the season wore on, he earned targets and looked pretty good. But then, in week 11, he suffered a season-ending hip injury. Likely, they only need him as a return man. Short of an injury, that's all he'll be here. There were so many injuries last year, even Laquan Treadwell found time. But surprise, he showed pretty well. A quality depth receiver for the team. The rest of the receivers are Marvin Hall, Tim Jones, Jeff Cotton Jr., Kevin Austin, Lawan Winningham, and Willie Johnson. Kevin Austin is the prospect to watch here. 6'2", 200 pounds, he ran a 4.4. He's undrafted, out of Notre Dame. I think the additions via free agency were a good choice. Did they overpay? Yeah, but what do you care? It's not your money. I like that they added experienced NFL vets for their young quarterback, instead of piling rookies on top of rookies. Christian Kirk in Redraft and Dynasty. It's going to be a good year for him. I wouldn't bother in best ball. I think Kirk is bound for consistency, not explosions. You could take Marvin Jones in Redraft, but it would only be for depth. I think he'll be better for the Jaguars than for fantasy. At 32 years old, Jones is off the Dynasty radar. Right now, Zay Jones is going in the grundle of drafts. Roster him late in all formats. Though his production is likely to be uneven, he's going to outperform his ADP. I'm out on Laviska Shenault. You say Deebo light, I say gadget player with a shrinking role. The only reason to stash him in Dynasty is you have a Laviska voodoo shrine, and you've been splashing it with Kyle Shanahan's cologne and beard clippings in the hopes he finds his way to the Niners. Could happen. Evan Ingram was added in free agency. Last year, he had 408 yards and 3 touchdowns with the Giants. He was 3rd in receiving yards. On a Doug Pederson offense, the tight end position is very valuable, usually a top 10 for the position, but that's probably also because those tight ends were Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and Dallas Goedert. And Evan Ingram is, checks notes, not. Evan Ingram is fast. End of list. He hasn't been great the past few years, but some of that has to do with Jason Garrett's offense in New York. It wasn't tight end friendly, and Ingram's production slumped. Plus, he drops the ball sometimes. However, he did get paid. Evan Ingram is likely to be fantasy relevant once again. Rise from the ashes, you filthy phoenix. And this time, hold on to the ball! Dan Arnold was added mid-season last year through a trade with the Panthers. He became a favorite target of Trevi Lala, though his fantasy numbers were modest. He played 8 games before suffering a knee injury, ending his season on IR. Last year, with similar targets, Dan Arnold actually graded out as a better tight end per PFF. Arnold is the same age as Ingram. He's also a very athletic pass-catching tight end. Those signs point to Ingram being the primary here. There's no reason to think Arnold won't be involved or couldn't outperform Ingram during the season. The backups are Chris Manhertz, Luke Farrell, and Garrett Prince. Manhertz and Farrell are better blocking tight ends, and undrafted Prince probably won't survive the final cuts. It's possible he's added to the practice squad. Grab Evan Ingram in all formats. You're banking on his upside. I don't trust him as a starter, but I'm willing to roster him as a second or third. Grab Dan Arnold in Dynasty. If you can afford to stash him, I just like him better than Ingram. I know all signs point to Ingram as a starter, but Dan Arnold could still win this job at some point. And if anything happens to Ingram, you won't be alone on the waiver wire trying to get him. If you're in on the tight end position in Jacksonville simply because of Doug Pederson, you should be in on Evan Ingram and Dan Arnold. The Jags ranked near the bottom last year defensively. For fantasy, not a single player finished inside the top 20 in points for their position. That ain't good. Foye Oluokun was added in free agency after he got a 3-year, $45 million contract, worth every damn penny. He was the top linebacker in points for IDP last year. He had a great season with the Falcons. He's only 26 years old. He's probably very nice. You probably already missed out, but if you can get him on your roster, do it! Linebacker Josh Allen started to come into his own last year, which sounds gross. His numbers were erratic, but in weeks 8 and 9, he dominated. 13 tackles, 2 for loss, 1 fumble recovered, 1 interception, and 3 sacks. And most of that came against the Bills' Josh Allen. That's some Allen on Allen crime, y'all. He pestered the shit out of him, and he was home watching highlights of himself on SportsCenter that night. With better additions around him, I expect more, not fewer opportunities this year. Invest in Josh Allen. The Jaguars took Trayvon Walker with their first overall pick in the draft. An edge rusher who'll be playing outside linebacker in the Jags 3-4 scheme. He's athletic as hell. 6'5", 272 pounds. He ran a 4.5 40 at the combine. He's an immediate starter on the opposite side of Josh Allen. Despite all that, I'm only recommending the watch list for him. He's only 21 years old. He's adjusting to a new position. I don't doubt his ability, but I'm going to slow roll him in his rookie year. Not every athletic freak is IDP gold right out the gate. Devin Lloyd was the other first-round pick this year. He wasn't the first linebacker off the board, but he's probably the best. 6'3", 237 pounds. He's physically gifted, but he excels mentally. I don't mean math and shit. He has great vision to diagnose plays. He'll start inside with Foye Oluokun. The Jaguars invested in Lloyd. You should too. Chad Muma was one of my favorite linebackers going into the draft. He's a tackling machine. Note to self, invent a tackling machine. Jacksonville took him in the 3rd. He's 6'3", 237 pounds. His tape is good. His metrics are good. His RAS is great. Unfortunately, there are just too many good linebackers in front of him. Put him on your watch list for the future. The Jags have a lot of work to do to build this team back up again, especially on defense, but I like their most recent moves and their last 2 drafts. Looking at the schedule, I could see 7 wins for them this season, which seems bold considering they've only won 7 games once in the last decade, but honestly, I could see 8 wins. Ooh, hot take. We got a hot take here. Did you feel it? Hot take! No, it didn't feel right. As soon as it came out, it didn't feel right. Let's take it back. Let's go back to 7. 7? Thanks for watching Shut Up Football. We'll catch you next time. Peace!
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. it sound right, boy.
You think I should have said 6 wins? Six wins. Yeah.